Hey guys, Mr. Thibodeau. So let's go ahead and jump right into our history lesson, okay? So first off, this page is wrong. That is not a buffalo. That is a bison. There are no buffalo in North America, okay? This is the reason we call these buffalo instead of bison as they actually are is a same reason we call Native Americans Indians. Okay, in Africa they have buffalo. Okay, water buffalo and the like. And because these animals look so similar, they call them buffalo. Truly, they're totally different genus, sort of similar, but they're in fact bison. Okay, massive creatures. If you've ever seen a bison head, they are truly magnificently large. You would be very small compared to this. This creature. A few other things that this talks about. One, it mentions sort of the having these vision quests and having this animal. Often, this is where we get the spirit animals from. And I want to point out that when we talk about like what's your spirit animal, it's actually really offensive because it's like as if not all of you will understand this reference, but if it's as if people were talking about like, hey, what's your saint? If we just started coming up with different in Catholicism, there's a whole ceremony where you pick a saint to help you and guide you closer to God or what have you. This is called confirmation, where you agree that you are part of the church when you're around, usually around when you're 18. And you sometimes people straight up change their names to incorporate that if they're saint. And if popular culture, if there started being internet fads of like, hey, click on this link, answer these questions to see what your saint is, that would be kind of similar to what we're doing right now with spirit animals. This idea that we can just pick an animal. It's one thing, like, yeah, we might have an animal that we're similar to or that we have something akin to. You know, that's fine. It's fine to say, like, what animal represents you, okay? But when we say spirit animal, that's a very specific thing, okay? That Native Americans, it wasn't just what animal they looked like or what animal they acted like. It was a whole thing. It was a whole ceremony, including getting into this trance-like state and having this vision. So it's when we say spirit animal, oftentimes in popular culture, we're really misusing it and we're really being inappropriate to the Native Americans' religion and their kind of conception of that. So I just want to point that out there. The other thing, it talks about white settlers in the 1800s also hunted the buffalo, resulting in near extinction. That's sort of correct. It was not the hunting of the bison that resulted in their near extinction so much as it was there's two things at play. One was the Native Americans with horses could now hunt bison much more frequently. Okay, they could go into the Great Plains and come out of it on the other side in a day. They could travel faster. They could hunt these bison. So bison were being hunted more for sure, and their population was being limited a little bit because the amount of land they had was also decreasing because people were moving in and building farms there. But the main thing that really cut back on the bison and really limited their survivability was trains. White settlers would get into trains, and the trains would go through the Great Plains, and that's fine. Except that white settlers would just start shooting shooting as they were on these trains, and as they're traveling, they would just shoot bison for fun. As they were traveling, if they saw a bison, they would just kill it because they wanted to test out their gun or whatever. And they were just murdering bison without any need of the meat or without any desire to actually eat the bison or grab the bison. And it was these sort of like drive-by shootings, basically, that really sealed it for the bison because whole herds were being killed as the trains are going through. And when a Native American hunts a bison, they're hunting one or two. A bison's going to feed a lot of people, and they're not killing whole herds anymore. And the white settlers definitely killed a few, but it's this attitude of killing for sport and for fun as opposed to because you need the meat. There's plenty of hunters. I'm sure you guys have family members who are hunters who go and hunt, and maybe you get a trophy, maybe you get the meat, but you're not just running around killing deer every which way, just mowing them down and not doing anything with the bodies. Also, deer is a whole different deal too, because deer are crazy prolific. Their population is booming like crazy. So even if you did mow a few of them down, you wouldn't be hurting them none. All right, a few other things over here. One, we don't often talk about the Mississippians. Okay, obviously the Mississippi River comes from the Mississippi people. They built big cities with walls. Okay, it says stockades here. That just means they're like wooden walls. Stockade is another word for walls. We also use it for a prison, or for we will say throw them in the stockades. What they really mean is the word means wooden walls. So the stockades was a small area of wooden walls that you would throw somebody in, a prisoner, and they'd be stuck in. So it's the same word. It's still talking about the wooden walls. It's just sometimes they're referring to a small prisoner enclosure versus sometimes they're talking about a wall around the city. Okay, stockades are just a basic palisade is another term that does means the same sort of deal, like a wooden wall. All right. Few other things here. I always hate when they just talk about the Iroquois without mentioning, and they sort of do, that they say that the Iroquois turned into the Iroquois League. Really, there's 6 tribes, not 5. The Iroquois, often referred to as the Mohawk. The Mohawks are probably the most famous of the Iroquois. We've all heard of the Mohawks. The Iroquois are going to be pivotal to early American history, or early United States history, because the Iroquois are going to be the ones to save basically all of the white settlers when they ally with the white settlers, the English settlers, over the other Native American tribes, and they fight against them. We were very close to being wiped out in the early days by a number of the Native Americans at the time. So, we talk about killing Native Americans or white folks thinking that, they were just better, but really we survived because other Native Americans fought for us many times. All right. Algonquin, they are more of a similar group. The Iroquois, definitely pretty different. People of the Longhouse, they all had that in common, but they were not all the same in the same way. There's more different religions or different languages in the Iroquois. Let's see. This corn, beans, and squash. Okay, we've talked about this. This has been over here as well. Corn, beans, and squash. Okay, these are the 3 sisters. They are pivotal. Okay, now the corn, beans, and squash do grow really well together, and they allow you to continue growing in the same spot for a while, but eventually you will still exhaust the land. And what the Iroquois and the Algonquin did is crop rotation. Okay, they built small temporary cities where they were. They grew plants and grew food until there was no more food, until it wasn't growing very well, and they moved. And by doing that, they would move a few different times, but it allowed the soil to regain its stuff. What happens is if you have a lot of weeds and different things like that come and live on the place, and then they die, and then the carbon that they've captured goes back into the soil. It rots. You get bugs eating all the stuff. As that soil just kind of exists there, it gets much stronger. It gets better. The soil gets minerals back. So if you just leave this area and then you come back to it, 100 years later, it's probably great land again. Okay. So the Iroquois and the Algonquin, they just moved back and forth between different places. This is what farmers in Europe will eventually figure out. So the Native Americans were pretty far ahead of us in of their some of their crop growing strategies. Okay, so not only had they figured out how to grow things together that would be very helpful and allow the soil to be sturdier and stronger, but also they already knew to move and do crop rotation, to burn the land every now and then, to allow the ash to be helpful. They had a fair amount of knowledge. I think agriculture is something that the Native Americans were actually really good at. This is just review stuff. You can read some of these things. Nothing too spectacular. I think the idea of hidden cities in Central and Southern America is pretty fascinating because it's so flat in many of these places. A lot of people, and the forests grew so high, people had no idea that there were these cities that had been completely overrun by plants and the forest. And so they had no idea that they existed until somebody went and found them. Sometimes they were able to find them through drones or flying overhead. Other times, even flying overhead, you can't really see them because of the forest is so much. Now we're able to find them using LiDAR and different, it's like a radar type technology. So we're finding more and more of these cities now, but it's still really fascinating. Okay, well, that's all I got for you guys. Have a good one, and